Wondering how your mindset affects your life? How to bring more energy into your business and life? Millions of people around the world ask these same questions daily. You are in the right place. Learn practices that will help give your life the meaning and success you've been searching for. Welcome to the Charge Podcast, teaching you how to create habits around real goals every day. Practical life advice from those who made it. Here's your host, Gary Wilbers.
Chargers, how are you doing? It's fourth quarter. Can you believe it? What are you doing to prepare yourself? We've told you all quarter, we're working to prepare yourself for 2022 so you can accomplish your goals. Now, really think about that. What do you want to do in 2022? Well, the thing is, the best thing to do is get some clarity on it in 2021, so then you can take action right out the gate. And that's what I've been really trying to share with you is different guests this quarter that really sets us up for success in 2022. And I think we've done it again. Dr. Ian Brooks, he is the CEO and founder of Rhodes Smith Consulting, a personal and professional development firm specialized in behavior transformations. And he's the author of Intention, Building Capabilities to Transform Your Story. For over 24 years, Dr. Brooks' career has taken him from working in clinical ward to organizations and people with the goal of helping individuals build skills towards achieving new heights. His clients include Netflix, Shondaland, Bank of America, Guitar Center, Nike, Sony, and Warner Brothers. His passion for working with individuals seeking expansion and leaders within organizations to develop key skills towards navigating their organization and working with their teams is built on the mastery of intentions and consistency of capabilities. I know this is going to be a great conversation. So, Dr. Brooks, it is great to have you on the Charge Podcast. Welcome.
No, thank you, Gary. Glad to be here.
Well, it is exciting to be able to really share your story. We shared a little bit of that, but give us kind of the background of really what brought you where you're at today.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And it's quite honestly an easy answer. As a 13-year-old, I decided that I wanted to be a psychologist. At that point in time, I was afraid of judgment. I never wanted to be too high on that spectrum of expectation of always getting A's or always getting the hit or, being really good at sports, because that came with its own level of expectations that I had no interest of participating in. Secondly, I didn't want to be so far down that totem pole where I had visibility on expectations of, okay, now I get additional attention that I did not want. So I just wanted to break even. And so it afforded me a chance just to kind of hide and just be normal, if you will, just sit in the background. And I started to think about, why do I do the things that I do? Why do my parents do the things that they do? And how did that influence me? As such, I was always conscious and aware of asking the question of, why are people doing what they're doing? What's their motivations? And as such, I just kind of tripped into the field of psychology. And it's taken me on a path of, as you mentioned, getting into clinical psychology, where I worked in a 24-hour lockdown ward doing individual and group therapy for adults. I also had the chance to do intelligence testing and personality testing for children, which was extremely fun. But I realized in those moments that it wore on me because I didn't have a release. Once you hear some of those things and stories of people and the children, there's no place to offset that. At least I didn't have one at the time. And so I was thinking to myself, well, I still love psychology. I still love what I do. I still love helping people achieve their next steps. And in that case, from a clinical side, it was just helping them become normal. But now I wanted to extend it to taking and working with people, adults, as well as those leaders, as you mentioned, in places where they're now already normal, and now they're just expanding themselves to do something more. And so that took me on a path of getting my doctorate in industrial organization psychology, where I've been able to work with a number of different leaders from, as you mentioned, a number of different organizations, all seeking the pursuit of expansion. Really, one, from a leadership standpoint, their skills and abilities on how they're leading their teams, creating strategy, communicating, how do they create engagement, how they create influence, as well as individuals just looking to expand their own lives, to go past their current normal and willing to take that risk to move forward. And it's led me on a journey of one that I could never have written myself, as much as also in an experiential standpoint, expanding myself and who I am as a person, stepping behind that curtain of judgment and really into a limelight of really support and infrastructure that really help people increase their capabilities.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that because that really sets us up. And I think now the audience knows why I wanted to have you on the podcast, because you heard in my opening, we're really taking this fourth quarter with our guest and really trying to help people really get clear on what they want. So as they go into 2022, instead of, writing out their goal at that time, they're really set up to really take off and really make it happen right out the gate. But I think one of the questions I want to start off with you is, what is the biggest struggle with change? Because what people are saying to themselves, they want that change, but they have them struggles getting started.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I often hear that quite often from my clients on where do I start? And it's a great question to ask. And the first thing I tell people is look inward. When they're actually looking to identify the capabilities and what they're hoping to achieve, in our case, as we think about 2022, it's about what is it that I'm finding passion about? Let's take stock in who I am. And do you understand what your value is? What is your purpose? What drives your passion? What have I been very good at up to this point? What have I needed to build some strength around? Where is my potential gap? And in that context, as we're looking towards, and as I work with my clients on their future selves, I have them write down a note, write down a letter to themselves in that future self, acknowledging all the things of who they are, who they've become, and what they've achieved. That tells me now, it gives us some benchmark of which now we're actually living it from an experiential standpoint. It also gives me a comparison point of what I'm doing today. In that comparison, we oftentimes struggle with, and I often see my clients a lot. They just want to get to an end result, right? They just want to just hurry up and get done. Like, I just want to get this done. Social media has fed into our world and lives that I want to achieve what someone else has already done, yet we don't understand their path. I talk about this quite a bit in the context of discovery in my book, Intention, Building Capabilities to Transform Your Story. And that's the reason I talk about discovery, because people need to understand who they are, what their values are, and now setting themselves up for success on that achievement in behaviors, not an end result, towards their new future.
So with the letter that you were talking about, they should write that in the standpoint they're there, correct?
Absolutely. They're going to write that from a standpoint that they're there. And so as we're thinking about it right now for 2022, I wouldn't write it for January. I'd write it for June of next year. Who is that person? But also, as we're thinking about writing that letter to ourselves, it's an acknowledgement of achievement of behavior, not an endpoint. Yeah. But also, as we're thinking about writing it for ourselves, pay attention to our environment. What's surrounding us? What are the people, places, and things? How are they interacting with us potentially in a new way, in a more positive way, helping support us in that new reality? Because as we think about change, we often think about it as a singular, isolated, personal event. And oftentimes it really is. But let's also acknowledge that our environment supports and sometimes hinders our ability to achieve our results. And as in that context, when we're writing that letter for ourselves in June of 2022, be cognizant of how the people in your life keep you where you are, because it's their safety, not yours. The relationships that you have with, say, food or a job title or et cetera. Let's change the relationship of that. And what does that now look like? Even now your routines. And so when you write that letter, put it in the context of yourself, but also never forget the environment that's surrounding you and now going to support you as you move forward.
So as we take that 50,000 foot view of the process someone would really undertake to operate under intention, share with us how they can really take that view and process and really allow them to really live by intention versus, living day to day, as most of us do.
Yeah, a lot of us do live day to day. And I'll, just to touch on that for a moment, we make between 2,000 and 10,000 decisions each day. 95% of them are unconscious, which tells me that we're just running on autopilot most of the time, right? When we're working with intention, it's really about purpose. It's about thoughtfulness. It's about bringing our best selves in that moment. And when we're doing that, it takes a lot of both mental, emotional, and also physical wherewithal, and sometimes draining to actually get there. So when we're actually talking and working with intention, we're really taking and empowering ourselves to now move forward on a day-to-day basis. Now, how do we do that? To now your second part of your question. In my book, Intention, I talk about it building capabilities, again, behaviors. The first being is around the discovery, as I briefly alluded to, but I'll talk about more now. That first part through discovery is understanding what you're really solving for. We're often seeing, as I mentioned, just end results. Well, we're not really seeing the behaviors, the routines, the emotional toll of which actually we're really trying to solve and trying to create as we move forward. Our discovery in issues and even areas of which we want to expand will change for us today. It's going to change for us 3 years from now. But if we build a capability to acknowledge what we're actually discovering, we're going to be in a better place to actually move forward. The second part of that is also the principle of you. Again, I touched on it briefly, but going into more detail, the capability of understanding what characters in your story are you actually enabling, as well as what characters do you need to change. Now, when I say characters, it's not that you're a brother or a sibling or a husband or a father. It's not that you're a VP. It's that I'm Mr. Know-it-all, right? Oh, I need a degree for everything. Or I'm shy. Or I'm the abominable snowman, right, of the Bugs Bunny show, where I'm always, holding things so tight that I can't let things go because I want it so bad, but yet I'm really killing the thing that I really want. What characters influence who you are? Because guess what? Once you recognize what you're discovering and the principle of you, you're now able to say, what is now my plan? What is the plan that I'm willing to go forward with? Because now I've taken stock in my own personality, my own issues. What am I willing to do? And that plan is now authentic to what I want to achieve, not to what I've seen or what is prescribed to me. And that's the third piece, building that plan. Now, the other part that I expand on from a capability standpoint, there's a fourth, fifth, and sixth part to this. The fourth piece is around creating the experience of taking baby steps. We're not trying to do all this at once. Sometimes bringing our best of ourselves is knowing when to step back. We need to be able to relax sometimes because we're constantly thinking about this in a conscious way of doing something new. That's going to be draining. So no different than a child that you tell to sit down in class all day to be the best student they can, obey your teachers, don't fidget, etc. Sit. What happens as soon as they leave school? They're going to be hells on wheels, right? They just need to let go. Well, adults are no different, and especially when we're trying to control so much. When we have our experience, we're creating singular events each week, each moment in each day, of which now to practice. And creating opportunities for us to expand ourselves. Because we didn't get here all at once. Thus, we're not going to change all at once either. So creating that experience that it builds on itself. The fourth thing is around attunement. It's around attunement, reflecting each week on what we're doing. The fifth is around making sure that we have a time to actually go back and check and adjust. What are we adjusting for ourselves? Not being afraid that we're going through the learning experience. And all this drives us to the last and final point of capability is the gift of knowledge. We're constantly learning. If we're not learning, we're going to stay in the same place. We're going to stay in our same rotation. We're going to stay in our same routines. That also means we have to be willing to give up stuff too. And so between those 6 capabilities, that's truly what living intentionally means. It's not done all at once. It is built over time. But these capabilities are transferable to just about any situation that you're looking to do something different.
Yeah, I love how you talk about, it's a process and realizing that it's a process over time. Yeah. And that's really anyone's journey that gets there. Everybody wants that person that's made that success, but it's been a process and it's over time that it happens. And we need that because, there's plenty of studies out there. People that become millionaires through the lottery normally lose their money in a short amount of time because why? They didn't know how to handle the money to start with. Absolutely. So life is the same way. And I love what you're talking about intention. I'm kind of curious with the research that you did and with really writing the book, what was your most surprising thing that you learned about yourself as you was really writing the book? Because I'm sure that came through.
Absolutely. I think I learned more about myself than I honestly was trying to impart onto others. It's funny, when I first wrote the book Intention that I have here, this copy is really the second copy, as the first copy that I wrote was intended to be an audiobook. I actually if you go back to my first statement of who I was as a 13-year-old scared of judgment, as you might imagine, writing a book and being an entrepreneur, I'm in the face of judgment every day. I'm ridiculed every day. So I had to step from behind that curtain in a way that I had never allowed myself to be, both in that fear of judgment as that 13-year-old, but even as a professional, as a clinical psychologist, where we're not taught to share our perspectives. We're just taught to keep it within ourselves. And so as I began writing this book, and as I was going through that process, I realized as I was sitting in the booth doing the audiobook version to be recorded and sent out, I was scared. I didn't realize that when I was sitting in the booth, and it was less about my inability to read, as much it was like, oh shit, people are actually going to hear this. People are really going to actually hear what I have to say now. And so as I was talking and just reading the words I had written, I was like, I don't feel confident in this. I didn't feel confident in my voice. I didn't feel confident in what I had written. I hadn't allowed myself to express myself and give examples in ways that would afford a reader to know how I got to that point. It was just go do this. I was like, I'm missing the whole point. And I remember after going through that experience, sitting there after the first day, just emotionally drained, just exhausted. And I got through it. I said, okay, this is part of your learning experience. This is part of your learning journey. This is part for you. And if you really want to write this book, if you really want to now afford people to have an opportunity to learn from what your experiences have been, both from what you've done with other clients, but also from your own now self, you're going to have to let some things go and now grow. It was a time for me to acknowledge who I had become and the safety I'd created for myself in a world that was combined between my environment and kept me nice and comfortable, to now expanding myself in ways that was like, wow, I need to do something different. And now I have a choice to make. What am I now willing to do? And so as such, I had to come to the conclusion that if I'm going to write this book, I need to be able to let go. And if I don't want to write this book, that's perfectly fine. No one's going to think any less of you or otherwise. You could just say, hey, you just stop because it was just too much time. But being the person I am, I'm not a quitter. And it's just a matter of when, not if, I achieve something or execute something that I'm going to take this step. But that experience, that analysis of my own self, of being not only the client, but also the author, really afforded me a chance to become the author this book needed me to be. One that is more transparent, one that has enabled me to grow, one that is pushing my boundaries, even to this very conversation today, to be the person that I needed to be. So not only am I the author, but I'm also the client in a way that I could never have anticipated. And I continue to push myself in ways that create that vulnerability, knowing that I have the capability to move past it, but now it's my choice. And in that choice and in those capabilities, knowing that I can achieve it, it's just a matter of when, not if.
Dr. Brooks, I'm so glad you shared that, because that really sets up some of the audience. Some of the chargers are sitting there right now. They want to take that next step. But of course, comfort zone, whatever words you want to use, your own self, where you feel most comfortable, you have to step out of that. And we all have to at certain times. I'm getting ready to start a virtual mastermind. That takes something different from Gary than the one-on-one with most of my clients that I work with. But we have to decide to step out of it out of that comfort zone before we can ever reach there. And it's really interesting that you had to see that in yourself. And when you did that, it really changed your perspective, and it really helped you really lay out the book, I'm sure, in a manner that becomes not only helpful, but now they're hearing some of you in that story, and it makes it easier to read.
Absolutely. As a result of going through that experience and even just hearing my audiobook, I scrapped the entire book and started from scratch. But in that moment, in that authentic, vulnerable, scared state, I also was invigorated. Yeah. I was empowered. I let go of the voices that were telling me, no, you don't need to write this book, that just keep where you are. You don't need to say all those things, or you don't need to go as in depth. And one might argue that I don't go in depth in certain ways, but just imagine to the extent in which I wasn't going in depth before. That experience really allowed me to grow, allowed me to rewrite the entire book in a 6-month period, knowing I wasn't starting from scratch, but just giving more of myself. And as you mentioned, putting myself into the book in ways that I never even thought about putting it, and telling the story of authenticity, of vulnerability. And even I talk about my video recording and an audiobook recording in the book as a prime example of that, because I think we all go through, in fact, I know we all go through that experience of vulnerability of, wow, I need to do something different. I need to be able to let go of my last self, not because it was bad, but maybe I've just outlived its purpose. Yeah. Now I need to expand beyond ways that I've never experienced. And I know my clients are looking for the same thing. And so I can relate to it and tell the story in ways that, as a clinical psychologist, as a 13-year-old fearing judgment, that I've expanded beyond that.
Yeah. And I think that's a message for all of our listeners. We can expand behind what we are now. We can move forward. We can decide to do it, but you have to decide to move forward. And I think that's a message that really resonates, because as we're in fourth quarter, we want something else. And I know someone's listening today and they need that message that they can expand behind it. Maybe they've got a very successful business, but maybe they're not passionate about that. Maybe you have to decide what that next chapter is. And if you look at it as a book, it's about creating the next chapter. Who you are. 1990, I got into the mobile phone industry. 2012, I sold out when we were in the wireless industry. But I didn't want to be known just as the guy in the wireless industry.
Right.
And people would ask all the time, what are you going to do next? And I decided to follow that passion and that purpose that I have of coaching, speaking, and training because of that. And I know someone else wants to do that too. So just great conversation to be able to really share with the Chargers. I'm glad you said yes, so you came on board. But I have one more, because we've covered a lot of topics and we've covered a lot of things that can help them. But what would you share leaving this interview if someone really wanted to pursue this and move forward? What's 2 or 3 most important things they can do to help them move forward?
Yes. And we touched on it very briefly, but I definitely want to call it out. The first thing is trust yourself. If you don't trust yourself and your own capabilities, then quite frankly, there's no one else that's going to be able to pull you through. It's in those moments of challenge and struggle where your will, where your passion, where your heart is going to be tested, of which no one else can pull you through. And in that context, that's really where your motivation and your trust is in yourself, in your confidence is really going to really shine. It doesn't mean that it's easy. It just means, in fact, that you can do it. The second piece, I would say, and I'll take a quote from a gentleman by the name of Niccolo Machiavelli in his book, The Prince, that he wrote in, I believe, in 1532. And his quote in there said, "He who lays his foundations does not lay his foundations beforehand, may do so with great ability afterwards, but with great trouble to the architect and danger to the building." That quote really resonates with me in what I work with my clients on, because if you don't have a foundation, and if you just rush in to solve, I can almost guarantee you that you might have the ability to go do it in the back end. I'm quite confident you could, right? Because that's what we always do. But that doesn't mean it's right. But if you're really trying to transform and really taking that next step, trust to build the foundation that you need before moving forward. Because if not, it is going to be great trouble to you to go back and try to do it. And let's be honest, how many times do we actually really go back? And when we do go back, and by the time when we're really focused on going back and trying to fix something, it is going to be great danger to the building, because now we're going to start pulling things away and changing things that are going to be destructive. And guess what? All those things that we built our lives around, all that dirt that we swept underneath the rug, it will become a mountain and be twice as much work. So please trust yourself and never forget to build your foundations, because that's going to build your capabilities moving forward.
Great advice. I appreciate you sharing that, because I'm always one about how can you put it in practice, because we get tied into talking about everything, but it's really about what can you move forward with. And I just think those are 2 practical things of trusting yourself. because it's not always going to be easy.
Yeah.
If you want to go where you want to go, that's normally not an easy path, because it's not the easy road. It's not the comfort level. There's going to be some obstacles that will come up, and then building the foundation, of what you want that to be. I truly appreciate you sharing that. Dr. Brooks, before we go on, number one, we've talked about the book a couple of times, but share with them how they can get a copy of that, and also your website if people want to check out your information.
Sure. So, and I'll start with the website. So people can go to my website. That's at rhodessmith.com. That's RHODESSMITH.com. There they can find my book, Intention, Building Capabilities to Transform Your Story, where it can be found on Amazon as well as Barnes & Noble, in hard print as well as an ebook. And that audiobook is coming out shortly. You'll see reviews on the book as well. Also on that website, you'll see this podcast and several others where I've been giving my perspective on a number of different topics on transformation and personal change. There as well, you'll see my coaching one-on-one, as well as, Gary, as you mentioned, kind of a mastermind group coaching experience where we're managing our intentions over a 6 weeks period of time to really help build the foundation for us to move forward. I can also be found on Twitter and Instagram at DrB_intention.
Super. So check it out. We'll have it all in show notes. So if you are doing something active right now, can't write it down, don't worry. We'll have it in chargepodcast.com so you can easily link to it. My son, Chris, does a great job on show notes. So please don't hesitate to go there and check that out, Chargers. Now, we're not going to let you go just yet, Dr. Brooks, because we have those 3 recharge questions that I want to ask you. And the Charge podcast is named Charge. That's after a mantra: create habits around real goals every day. What habit do you think's led to success in your life?
One habit that I've led to my success is truly my intention. It's being very purposeful in what I've been able to achieve and also what I'm focused on. It sets me on my priorities. It allows me to really hone in on my authenticity and be very specific on how I even manage my days, my time, and my effort, recognizing that I don't always need to do something. Sometimes I just need to relax, but also, and more specifically, being purposeful. And when we do that, that always leads us to, from a consistency standpoint, being more intentional and achieving what we hope to achieve.
It's great. I have an acronym. I like acronyms, evidently. You've noticed. SPA, simple positive action. I like to go to the SPA too, so it always sounds good. But sometimes a simple positive action will allow you to kind of move forward each day. What's your simple positive action?
My simple positive action is investing time in myself by pausing, processing, and reflecting. Oftentimes that takes the shape for me by going to the gym every morning, having that time to invest in my own personal health, my mental well-being, just to recenter, to focus on the day, and recognize that I've given just even the slightest opportunity to invest in myself. As given our fields, Gary, obviously we're doing a lot for a lot of other people, but this affords me that simple action of just taking the time to invest in my own health, both physical and mental, to get me set for the rest of the day.
Yeah. And that's really, I love when Chargers are listening to this and they hear that, because they're getting part of it by listening to podcasts, but you also get it by that exercise and whatever it is for you. Everyone's different. If you're a workout person, that's great. This morning I was up at 5:30 because I went to a class called Body Pump so I could be with other people. But decide what it is for you, because mentally as well as physically, when you do that, you're going to be able to get more accomplished and really allow you to set that intention that we've talked to. Because most people don't realize, if we hit the snooze button, it actually makes us more tired. There's science behind it. So that becomes the key. The last question for you, we've talked about some of them life lessons you learned over time, but what would be your biggest life lesson that you would share with the audience and the lesson you've learned from it?
Sure. For me, it's fairly simple as well. And that is that I can always have a plan and have a good plan, but my path is my path. No different than Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. Her goal was always to get back to Kansas. Her goal and path was to follow the Yellow Brick Road and get to Oz. She never knew she was going to run into Tin Man. She never knew she was going to run into the Scarecrow, Cowardly Lion, or heck, even fight the wicked witch. But she had confidence in herself. And also she had one goal in mind, and that was getting back to Kansas. Recognize in my own life that I knew I had a plan of being a psychologist, but I didn't know what my path was. And I had to go through that experience. My path is my path. And quite frankly, I've yet to meet anyone who did not necessarily have a plan, or you could have had a plan, but your path is your path. Acknowledge it, build the capabilities to navigate it. And guess what? Trust yourself, because you'll come out a lot better and you'll have one hell of a story to tell afterwards at the very least.
That's right. Dr. Brooks, it has been a pleasure having you on the Charge podcast. Share with them again that website. We'll have it in show notes, but share with them how they can access you.
Yeah, again, I can be found at rhodessmith.com. That's RHODESSMITH.com. And there they can find me and have links to my social media as well as my book and this podcast and others. So it's been a pleasure to be here, Gary.
Well, it has been a pleasure having you on. And Chargers, I know this can transform your story if you decide to move forward. But it's about setting intention and then really creating the transformation that you're wanting. And that's been our whole setup this fourth quarter, is getting you prepared for 2022. So I hope you've seen those parallels with our guests that we've had. And Dr. Brooks' insight is amazing. So I would tell you, pick up the book. I have, of course, a stack of them. I'm going to be getting another one because I loved what he's shared with them. I have not got to read it yet, but I will be picking it up. So please make sure you do that and check out his website and all the materials they had. Dr. Brooks, great having you on the Charge podcast.
No, thank you, Gary. Wonderful to be here.
Chargers, I'm going to just leave it at this. Trust yourself. Trust yourself today as you move forward and decide what actions you want to take. As you do that, it becomes clear and your path you will be able to follow. Make it a great day. We'll see you back here next week with another great guest. Thanks for joining us.
This podcast is ended, but your life doesn't just stop. To continue your inspiring journey, head over to chargepodcast.com and access all the tools and resources mentioned on today's show. If you enjoyed this episode, consider sharing with somebody who may also benefit from the advice provided. That's chargepodcast.com. Until next time, charge in business and life.